So I've been making this joke lately, and it is a joke mostly, but I say, darn, it's a lot of work having a body. Right? It is. It's a lot of work having a body. Bodies need feeding and exercise and hydration. We have to manage doctor appointments and colonoscopies and mammograms and medication, and it all takes time and attention, and it's kind of a pain, although I suppose it's far better than the alternative. It's also a lot of work managing a home, staying informed, and it's a lot of work tending my heart and spirit so that I can stay present, engaged with life, at peace, hopeful. We need to think in all of these dimensions when we talk about self-care, which is taking care of ourselves. Now, I want to acknowledge that some of us have brains that don't really cooperate very much with taking care of ourselves. Did you know there are apps now that help with that? Like, talk about good and right and proper use of technology. There are these little game apps that help people manage their self-care. Wish they had that when I was younger, because it's sure taken me a long time to find the systems and practices that keep my life relatively functional. I call all of that process remedial adulting. Now, out in the wider culture, there's this notion that self-care is something you buy. Scented candles or bath bombs or spa days or wellness retreats, you name it. There are so many people looking to make a buck off of the stress and exhaustion that, frankly, are a byproduct of living in today's dysfunctional society. Enter Pooja Lakshmin, a psychiatrist and the author of Real Self-Care. She calls all of those entrepreneurial options faux self-care and offers instead 4 principles of real self-care. The first is, not surprisingly, boundaries. Boundaries and moving past guilt. She writes, you must be assertive in prioritizing your own needs and desires. To do that, you must learn to say no and set boundaries. This often means balancing the needs of people close to you, like your partner's preference or your children's needs, with your own desires and needs. In this process, you must learn to stop being controlled by feelings of guilt, which are inevitable, but can be managed. One of the remedial adulting skills I've been working on is to actually figure out my own needs and desires. In my marriage and as a parent to young kids, my hold on what I wanted and needed got kind of slippery. My sabbatical in 2019 marked a new phase for me, one where I started asking myself, okay, self, what do we actually want right now? And then listening for the answer became a central practice. And I don't always get what I want. You can't always get what you want. But I've gotten better. I've gotten much better at discerning what I actually need. So a few words about guilt. You know the old saw about putting your own oxygen mask on first, but for me it goes far beyond that. I've come to believe that doing things that we don't really want to do out of guilt is bad for everybody concerned. When I push through my sense of what is good and right and do something out of guilt, I wind up resentful and exhausted and overextended, which is bad enough, but I've noticed that my actions tend not to be as effective as the ones I take that feel easy and natural. I've learned to trust my inner compass. It knows not just what's right and wrong for me, but the best way to offer support without sliding into codependence. Lakshmin's second principle of real self-care is to treat ourselves with compassion. This means shifting our internal self-talk to make it kinder, as well as identifying what we need and giving ourselves permission to have it. My favorite trick for cultivating self-compassion is actually to treat myself the way I seek to treat others, sort of a reverse golden rule. Do unto myself as I typically do unto others. I ask myself questions like, would I speak to someone else this way? Would I force them to do something that would cause them harm? Would I have this judgment of someone else who made the same decision in the same situation? And usually the answer is no. So then there's the reverse golden rule. Don't do unto myself what I wouldn't do unto others. Lakshmi's third principle is about authenticity. Real self-care requires getting to know who we really are. She writes, it's a process of getting to know yourself, your real self, including your core values, beliefs, and desires. It's an internal decision-making process that requires introspection, honesty, and perseverance. You'll know you're practicing real self-care when it feels like your outsides are matching your insides. I call this being in flow. It's a feeling of being in alignment. To me, there's a component that's almost mystical. When I'm in alignment, I feel more alive and awake and present. And when I'm able to stay solid in my integrity this way, not only do I feel better, but I'm more effective across the board. Last but not least, Lakshmi writes, real self-care is an assertion of power. It requires claiming our right to self-determination, even in the face of systems of oppression that try to make us small, try to squeeze us into a box of their making, rather than allowing us to occupy our true shape. She writes, real self-care is about making yourself bigger, and in turn, shifting long-standing systems of power. We are the only ones who can give ourselves permission to practice real self-care. It's having the audacity to say, I exist and I matter. These are revolutionary acts, and it's only when a critical mass of people do this internal work that we will come to collective change in our world. So boundaries, self-compassion, integrity, and claiming our power. Real self-care. It's a far cry from $20 bath bombs. I agree with Lakshmi that they offer a path both to personal well-being and to the necessary societal change. So that's self-care, how best we take care of ourselves. What about community care, how we take care of each other? Just as the pandemic started, I came across a viral tweet by Toronto-based community organizer and researcher Nikita Valiero that read, shouting self-care at people who actually need community care is how we fail people. I saw the tweet just before pandemic started and was intrigued enough to dig a little deeper. Nikita Valiero defines community care as people committed to leveraging their privilege to be there for one another in various ways. She writes, it's more than going to someone's art opening. It's about being committed to being there for people. It's about being there for people without them having to take the initial first step. It's about adopting an ethos of compassion and very intentionally applying that. In other words, it means embracing the responsibility to take care of each other, and not just our family and friends, not just our tribe, not just the people who look like us or act like us or think like us. Now, when I say that we have an obligation to take care of each other, does it make you feel tired? Maybe a little overwhelmed? You know how we talk about compassion fatigue? Well, it turns out, I just learned that compassion fatigue is a misnomer. And here's why. I'm going to tell you a story that was told to me. A researcher who wanted to understand the neurobiology of compassion hooked a renowned Buddhist, famous for his amazing open-heartedness, up to an EEG machine and asked him to begin his compassion practice. She expected to see his mirror neurons firing, indicating he was experiencing vicarious stress and vicarious pain. But it turns out that's not what happened. His pain centers remained quiet. She was surprised and asked him, "Can you focus more on the suffering?" He did. And she got the response that she had anticipated. And she was about to start removing the sensors when he said, "Wait, don't you want me to move from suffering to compassion?" So she left the machine on and she watched, and he began his practice. And the pain and stress centers in his brain quieted again, while the part of his brain that experiences love and comfort lit up like a Christmas tree, indicating a release of oxytocin, also known as the cuddle hormone. In other words, if we do it right, compassion is a restorative process. Compassion is a restorative practice. When we practice compassion rather than just feeling empathy, it will make us happier, not just more drained. Now, what's the difference between empathy and practicing compassion this way? So Frank Rogers is the director of the Center for Engaged Compassion, and he's the one who shared this story with the UU ministers of the Pacific Northwest. And Rogers identifies 5 essential components of a compassion practice. So we start with contemplative awareness. He writes, "Usually, when persons relate to one another, we do so through instinctive reactivities conditioned by our own needs, desires, prejudices, and conditionings. We do not so much see other persons on their own terms, rather we perceive them through the lenses of our own various agenda. They are objectified pawns in our personal projects, not multidimensional subjects with depth and uniqueness. Contemplative awareness, as Walter Burghardt has classically defined it, entails a long, loving look at the real." So I've talked about this before as the I-thou shift. This is Martin Buber. We shift from I-it, where we relate to others as objects, to I-thou, relating to one another as sacred subjects, right? So that's where we start. The second component is empathic care. Rogers writes, "In contrast to the indifference, coldness, and rational detachment of the unmoved, the compassionate person allows another's pain or joy to reverberate within one's deepest core, such that they are moved to pathos before the other's suffering, or stirred to delight before their flourishing. Once more, the recipient knows the difference. In attachment language, the recipient feels felt. They feel got. They feel like someone gets what they feel and gets it to the point of caring." So step 2, we hold space. We bear witness. We listen deeply. The third component he calls all-accepting presence. At the core of compassion is a quality of presence that is non-judgmental, all-embracing, and sympathetically understanding about the conditions and causes that give rise to the recipient's experience. Like the mother cradling her child, the womb-like love of compassion carries no hint of shame, critique, aversion, or belittlement. So we hold in love. No judging, no fixing, no advising, just acceptance. The fourth component is a desire for flourishing. He writes, "Compassion not only grieves with the wounded and pain, it yearns that suffering be transformed into joy. Compassion is not possessive. Tenderly receiving another's experience gives rise to the yearning that the other flourish with the fullness of life." So we might say we hold hope. We hold hope for better times, that the person we're being compassionate toward will find deeper resilience, that they'll find moments of joy and beauty. Last but not least, we have restorative action. Rogers writes, "Compassion is responsive. It takes some step toward easing another's suffering and nurturing their flourishing." So sometimes the restorative action might just be letting the tears flow, or offering a hug or a cup of tea, and sometimes more is required. We shouldn't do things that don't feel good and right for the sake of others, but we should prioritize doing things that do feel good and right, that emerge organically from the practice of compassion. That's how it shifts from being a drain to being a source of resilience and strength. Now, culture has tried very hard to convince us that there are winners and losers. So, of course, we want to win. It tries very hard to convince us we need more stuff, so we keep consuming. It tries to convince us that our fellow human beings are dangerous and out to get us, so we isolate. These are lies. These are lies. We can stop striving. We can relax. We can trust that our community has our back and will make sure that we have enough. Not everything we need or want, but enough. We don't have to believe the culture's poisonous lies. Done right, taking care of others is just another way to take care of ourselves. I am we are me. Because we're all connected, my thriving depends on your thriving. My thriving is enhanced by your thriving. Life is not a zero-sum game or a competition. When everybody has the support that they need to offer their gifts and their light, there's just more goodness and light in the world. It's not like there's a limit on kindness or love. There are limits on resources, but as another viral post puts it, poverty exists not because we can't feed the poor, but because we can never satisfy the rich. There's another reality underneath this one. It's waiting to emerge, and it's woven out of compassion and love. And it's our job to imagine it together. It's our job to start living into it, even, or maybe especially, when things are uncertain and chaotic, and it feels like hate has the upper hand. We just need to keep taking care of ourselves and each other. Okay? Okay. So be it. And blessed be.